May 16th, 1984. The world learns that comedian Andy Kaufman has died of lung cancer at age 35. His family mourns. His friends grieve. Hollywood holds memorial services. But some of Andy's closest friends refuse to believe he's actually dead. Why? Because Andy Kaufman had told them, multiple times, that he was planning to fake his own death and disappear for 30 years. And 40 years later, there's evidence that suggests he might have actually done it. If you love mysteries that challenge everything you thought you knew, smash that like button and subscribe. We're about to go down one of the strangest rabbit holes in Hollywood history. To understand why people believe Andy Kaufman faked his death, you first need to understand who Andy Kaufman was. He wasn't just a comedian. He was a performance artist who blurred the line between reality and fiction so completely that nobody ever knew what was real. He created Tony Clifton, an obnoxious lounge singer who was so convincing that people thought Tony was a real person, not Andy in disguise. He wrestled women on live television, reading their hate mail on camera while maintaining absolute deadpan seriousness. He took an entire audience out for milk and cookies after a show. He brought sleeping bags to performances and took naps on stage. Andy Kaufman's entire career was built on one principle: make people question what's real. So when he told his girlfriend, his writing partner, Bob Zmuda, and several close friends that he was planning to fake his death and return 30 years later, was he joking? Or was he planning the greatest performance of his life? In the early 1980s, Andy started talking about his ultimate prank. He told Bob Zmuda, his closest collaborator, "I'm going to fake my death. I'll disappear for 30 years, then I'll come back and reveal it was all a joke." Bob laughed. Everyone laughed. Because with Andy, you never knew. But Andy was specific. He said he'd choose a disease that would be believable. He'd plan it carefully. He'd make it look absolutely real. And then, in late 1983, Andy Kaufman was diagnosed with a rare form of lung cancer. He'd never smoked a day in his life. The diagnosis was shocking. But Andy's friends noticed something strange. Andy seemed calm. Almost too calm. He went through treatments. He traveled to the Philippines for alternative therapy. He told people he was fighting the cancer. And then, on May 16th, 1984, Andy Kaufman died. Or did he? Here's where things get weird. Andy Kaufman had a closed casket funeral. His family said it was because the cancer had ravaged his appearance, and they wanted people to remember him as he was. But closed casket? For a man whose entire career was about shocking people, about breaking the fourth wall, about blurring reality. Bob Zmuda attended the funeral. He looked at the closed casket and thought, this is exactly what Andy would do. Then came the memorial service. Robin Williams, Marilu Henner, and other comedy legends spoke about Andy. They shared memories, told stories, celebrated his life. But throughout the service, some people kept looking at the doors, waiting, expecting Andy to burst in and yell, "Surprise! Gotcha!" He didn't. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Andy didn't return. But the doubts never went away. Bob Zmuda, Andy's writing partner and closest friend, has spent 40 years being deliberately vague about whether Andy is really dead. In interviews, Bob has said things like, "I wouldn't be surprised if Andy walked through that door right now." Andy told me he would disappear for 30 years. That would put his return around 2014. If Andy were alive, he'd be watching us right now, laughing. In 2014, exactly 30 years after Andy's death, Bob Zmuda gave an interview where he said, "If Andy's plan was real, this would be the year. Stay tuned." 2014 came and went. Andy didn't appear. But Bob still won't definitively say that Andy is dead. Why? Is Bob part of the performance? Is he keeping the legend alive? Or does he actually know something? Over the past 40 years, multiple people have claimed to see Andy Kaufman alive. In 1999, a man who looked exactly like Andy was spotted at a wrestling event in Albuquerque, New Mexico. When approached, he smiled and walked away quickly. In 2004, a cab driver in New York swore he picked up Andy Kaufman. Same face, same voice. When the driver asked, "Are you Andy Kaufman?" the passenger smiled and said, "Everyone says that," and got out. In 2013, a woman came forward claiming to be Andy Kaufman's daughter. She said her father was alive, living in obscurity, and had asked her to attend a tribute event in his honor. She read a letter supposedly from Andy, explaining that he'd faked his death because he was tired of being Andy Kaufman and wanted a normal life. The Andy Kaufman fan community went insane. Was this real? Was it another prank? Bob Zmuda later said the woman was an actress and it was all a tribute performance. But was that the truth? Or another layer of the prank? Let's look at the evidence on both sides. Evidence Andy is really dead. Death certificate on file in Los Angeles County. Closed casket at funeral attended by hundreds. Cancer diagnosis confirmed by multiple doctors. No credible sightings verified by evidence. Family maintains he died. 40 years have passed with no return. Evidence Andy might be alive. Predicted his own death hoax years in advance. Closed casket equals no visual confirmation. Rare cancer plus never smoked equals suspicious to some. Bob Zmuda's continued ambiguity. Multiple alleged sightings. 2013 daughter incident. Andy's entire career was built on elaborate deceptions. He had the resources and connections to disappear. Here's what makes the Andy Kaufman theory so compelling. It fits his psychology perfectly. Andy Kaufman spent his entire career creating performances that made people question reality. His greatest fear was becoming predictable, becoming just another comedian. What would be the ultimate Andy Kaufman performance? Not a TV show, not a movie, not a wrestling match. The ultimate performance would be faking your own death, letting the world mourn you, watching from the shadows as people debate whether you're really gone, and then maybe never coming back. Because the mystery itself becomes the performance, the uncertainty becomes the art. In that sense, whether Andy is alive or dead almost doesn't matter. The fact that we're still talking about it 40 years later, still questioning, still wondering, that is the performance. Andy Kaufman created a prank that outlived him. Or maybe didn't outlive him. That's the point. In 2024, 40 years after Andy's death, Bob Zmuda gave another interview. He was asked directly, "Is Andy Kaufman alive?" Bob smiled and said, "I'll tell you this. Andy told me that if he faked his death, he'd reappear after 30 years. It's been 40 now. So either the plan changed or he really is gone." Then Bob added, "But knowing Andy, I wouldn't count him out just yet." So where does that leave us? Medical records say Andy Kaufman died of lung cancer on May 16, 1984. But Andy Kaufman's entire career was about making people question documents, question authorities, question reality itself. Theory 1. Andy is really dead. The cancer was real. The death was real. Everything else is just conspiracy theory and wishful thinking. Probability 85%. Theory 2. Andy faked his death and is living in anonymity. He pulled off the ultimate prank and he's somewhere laughing at all of us. Probability 10%. Theory 3. Andy faked his death but actually died later. He successfully disappeared in 1984, but died for real at some point in the past 40 years. Probability, 4%. Theory. 4. Andy is alive and planning to return. He's waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect punchline. Maybe tomorrow, maybe never. Probability, 1%. Here's what we know for certain. Andy Kaufman was a genius who dedicated his life to making people question what's real. He told his closest friends he would fake his death. He died in a way that left just enough doubt to keep the mystery alive, and 40 years later we're still talking about it, still wondering, still hoping that maybe, just maybe, Andy will walk through a door somewhere and say, "Gotcha." Whether Andy Kaufman is alive or dead, he succeeded in creating something immortal, a mystery that can never be fully solved, because the moment we know for certain that he's gone, the magic dies, the performance ends. And maybe that's exactly what Andy wanted, to never really die, to live forever in the question mark. So is Andy Kaufman alive? I don't know. Bob Zmuda doesn't know. Or he does, and he's not telling. Andy's family says he's gone. But somewhere in the back of all our minds, there's a tiny voice that says, "But what if?" And that voice, that's Andy Kaufman, still performing, still making us question, still refusing to give us a clean, simple, boring answer. What do you think? Is Andy Kaufman alive? Dead? Watching the video right now and laughing? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of entertainment's greatest mysteries, subscribe for more stories that make you question everything. Until next time. Or until Andy Kaufman walks through my door and tells me to delete this video.